Have you ever wanted to just quit your day job and spend all day burning stuff? Well, if so, then laser engraving might be the perfect way to make all your dreams come true while also keeping you out of jail. In this video, I'm going to go over 5 unique laser engraving ideas that will keep you felony free but also help you stand out. Let's get started. This video was sponsored by Monport, and they were kind enough to send me this Reno 65 Pro CO2 laser engraver for this project. The Reno 65 Pro features a powerful 65-watt laser tube, a 24 by 16 inch working area, assisted autofocus, and a multifunction control panel, all packed neatly into a desktop-sized machine. If at the end of this video you're interested in picking up one of these machines, make sure to use the code MODHOB to get 8% off your order. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump into project number 1. Acrylic QR code signs. So one of the best things about CO2 lasers is that they can cut clear acrylic, something that a standard diode laser can't do. So I took this scrap piece of 10mm frosted acrylic from a previous project and used the built-in assisted leveling guide to set the proper height for the laser. Now, the cutting parameters will vary depending on your machine, but I like to use this table from Monport to get a general ballpark and adjust as needed from there. Now, I use Lightburn to prepare all my laser projects, but this machine will work with any major software. In any case, I just drag in my QR code and create a rectangle around it with rounded corners. Now, one thing to keep in mind for QR codes, they are not secure at all. I bring this up because I've always wanted to make a QR code that connects devices in my home Wi-Fi so I can easily share it with my guests. However, to do that, you have to add your Wi-Fi SSID and password, which can easily be read by any potential nefarious actors that have access to your QR code. So instead, for this project, I'm just pointing the QR code directly to my YouTube channel. Now, the QR code is going to be engraved on the acrylic, so I just jumped back to the table to find the right parameters for engraving. Now, before I actually cut anything, I like to click the preview button in the top of Lightburn so that I can make sure it's going to do the right operations in the right order, and if I'm happy with how it looks, then I go ahead and start the operation. For the base of this sign, I was going to use some 1/4 inch walnut I had laying around, but I was an idiot and I made the cutout the wrong size, and now I don't have enough of it left. So instead, I just made the base from the same 10mm frosted acrylic, and I think it actually looks pretty good. There are a ton of different directions that you could take this idea to make your version unique. For example, you could pick up a cheap WLED controller and make it an edge-lit acrylic sign, which has the potential to look really cool. I did that with my walnut and acrylic speakers, and I'm biased, but I think they look frickin' awesome. Overall, these signs are pretty cheap to make, and they only take a few minutes to cut out. The second project idea is foam drawer inserts, and this one I'm particularly excited about because I am an absolute nerd when it comes to organization, and my dream shop is like just 100% drawers with cutouts for every single tool in my collection. To do this, I picked up this 2-color 4-layer Kaizen foam, which is actually pretty easy to cut with a utility knife. You pretty much just cut it and peel out the layers you don't want in there. But why cut it like that when you can use a laser? To get a more accurate cutout, I went ahead and took a photo with my phone of the utility knife, trying to get it as top down as possible, and then I went ahead and pulled it into Illustrator. In Illustrator, I used the pen tool to get as close of an outline to the actual utility knife as I could. It definitely doesn't have to be perfect, but make it as close as you can without driving yourself crazy. Now, one thing I want to call out here that I forgot to do was to add little thumb holes so you can actually pull the tool out of the slot, but I just added those later with the utility knife because, again, this stuff cuts really easy. Once I was happy with how the outline looked, I exported it as an SVG and then pulled that SVG into Lightburn. And since SVGs are infinitely scalable, you need to tell Lightburn how tall this cutout should be. So to do that, I just grabbed a ruler and got one of the dimensions of the utility knife and used that to set the height property of the SVG. Now keep in mind you need to click the lock button here, otherwise it's only going to scale in one direction. Now the parameter table I referenced earlier doesn't mention anything about Kaizen foam, so I kind of had to do some experiments to figure out the best parameters, and I found it useful to cut through the top 3 layers of foam so that I could always remove more or less if I wanted to. From there, the actual cutting operation only took a couple of seconds. One of the nice things about this foam is that you can peel out as many layers as you want to make the tool sit as deep into it as you want. Peeling out the layers is super easy and it only takes a couple of seconds, and honestly if you wanted to, you probably could put one of the layers back in if you went too deep. And you can see here I didn't quite think the utility knife sat deep enough into the foam, so I went back and removed another layer, and I liked that look a lot better. I just did this one as a demo because I don't actually have any drawers to fill, but you could really go as crazy as you want. The third project is PCB stencils, and this one's really interesting to me because I design a lot of PCBs, and if you order the stencil from an actual manufacturer, it'll come as this 5mm steel sheet, which my laser won't even be able to mark, so instead I'm using these 5mm Mylar sheets. This stencil is actually for a split keyboard design that I made, and all the pins for like the LEDs and the capacitors and the hot swap sockets, they all turned out great. But I really struggled with the MCU pins. The laser beam itself has a kerf just like any other saw blade would, but even after accounting for that kerf in light burn and setting the power output as low as it would go, I still couldn't get a great result. But luckily, hot air soldering can be pretty forgiving, so even if you struggle with those tiny MCU pins, you should still be able to produce a stencil that works well for any potential customers. The next project in the list is leather patch hats. This was actually one of the first projects I ever did when I first got a laser, and every time I've gotten a new laser, I've continued to make these hats just for myself and for my friends. It's a super easy project to do, and all you really need is a strip of leather, some blank hats, some wax to finish the leather, and a needle and thread for sewing. It usually helps to get the leather wet before you cut it because it'll cut better, but it'll also lay flat on your machine. For this project, I did two of these sort of pillar patches with the cutting and the engraving set to the parameters that I found in the table. I also added dots all the way around the perimeter that are set to cut all the way through, so that it should help with the sewing later on. This operation took 7 minutes to make 2 patches, which isn't too bad, and then I finished them up with a burnishing bit in my Dremel and a little bit of beeswax. To sew the patches onto the hats, I choose to use a little bit of fabric glue, which isn't entirely necessary. You can also use a punching tool to make the holes a little bit bigger, which should help to pull the needle through, because it can be kind of difficult to get that through both the hat and the leather. I like to sew them with a simple back stitch with about a 1 centimeter stitch length. I think it looks nice and it provides a good amount of strength. It costs about $10 to make each hat, and it took me about 15-20 minutes to sew it on, so once you get good at it, you should be able to make a pretty good profit off these hats. Before I let you go, I do want to cover a few safety topics for laser engraving to make sure you stay safe while doing any of these projects. First off, if you're running a laser, you need to make sure to properly ventilate it. I have my laser being pumped directly through a window in my shop using the built-in exhaust fan, and I even went so far as to completely sell all my open-air lasers. Second, even if you have your laser properly vented, make sure to never cut any of these materials on this no-cut list, and to be generally cautious around any foams or plastics. Some of these materials, like PVC, release chlorine gas when burned with a laser, and I shouldn't need to tell you how nasty that stuff is. Lastly, make sure to protect your eyes when working with lasers. These things can do some serious damage to your retinas. Now, the fifth and final project in this list is a stackable wine rack. I made this project from 1/2-inch maple, and the idea is you have interlocking pieces that assemble into an extensible wine rack, but also can collapse down for easy storage. Now, we talked about kerf a little bit earlier, and kerf is also super important for this project because of the way the pieces stack together. Initially, I didn't think this project was going to work, but even though I didn't have the kerf setting perfectly tuned in, the whole structure was actually way sturdier than I expected. The wine bottles actually help to solidify everything, and I'd probably be comfortable stacking this 4 or 5 bottles high. Now, if you're anything like my wife and I, you won't actually have a collection of wine because when we buy a bottle, we drink it. But if you have friends over or family coming over, you can stack up your fancy wine rack to show off. Now, this operation only took about 20 minutes to run, but the downside is that it does take a bit more time to sand off all the burn marks. I didn't show the sanding portion because it's boring, and I'm sure you've seen enough woodworkers on YouTube sanding. But overall, a longer manual effort, but if done correctly, you should be able to make a nice profit off this project. That's going to be it for this video. I hope you found these projects interesting and the tips and tricks helpful, and if you have any other project suggestions, drop them in the comments below. Huge thanks to Monport for sponsoring this video and by sending me the Reno 65 Pro, which I used to make all these projects. If you liked this machine and you want to pick one up for yourself, then use the link in the description along with the code MODHOB to get 8% off your order. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.